What happens when one of Britain's most respected actors walks onto a daytime talk show expecting a friendly chat and instead finds himself under attack from a host determined to humiliate him on live television? In just 46 seconds, a simple question about his personal life would spiral into one of the most explosive confrontations ever broadcast on daytime TV, ending with security being called and a guest storming off set while millions watched in shock. Sean Bean settled into the bright pink sofa on the Loose Women set, smiling politely as the studio audience applauded. He was there to promote his latest project, a gritty drama series that had critics buzzing. The panel that day included Denise Welch, who sat in the center with a knowing smirk, alongside Janet Street Porter, Colleen Nolan, and Kay Adams. The atmosphere seemed friendly enough at first, with light questions about his career and his iconic roles. But Denise had other plans. "So Sean," Denise began, leaning forward with an expression that seemed almost predatory, "let's talk about your personal life. You've been married, what, 4 times now? Some people might say you have a bit of a problem with commitment." The audience gasped softly. Sean's smile faltered for just a moment before he responded calmly. "Well, I think that's a bit of a simplification, Denise. Relationships are complicated, as I'm sure you know." Denise laughed, but it wasn't a warm sound. "Oh, I know all about relationships, love. But 4 marriages, that's not complicated. That's a pattern. What do you think the problem is? Is it you?" Kay Adams shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Denise, maybe we should—" No, Denise interrupted, waving her hand dismissively. "I think the audience wants to know. Don't you?" She looked out at the crowd, and a few awkward claps echoed through the studio. "See? They're curious. So, Sean, do you think you're just bad at picking women, or are you the problem?" Sean's jaw tightened. He took a breath and maintained his composure. "I think that's quite a rude question, actually. I came here to talk about my work, not to be psychoanalyzed by someone who doesn't know me." "Ooh, touchy," Denise said with a grin, looking at her fellow panelists. "Hit a nerve, did I?" Janet Street Porter jumped in, trying to lighten the mood. "Sean, let's talk about the new series. It looks absolutely brilliant." "Thank you, Janet," Sean said, clearly grateful for the lifeline. "Yes, it's a really intense character study about—" "I'm not done," Denise cut in sharply. The studio went quiet. "I think we need to address this because it speaks to character, doesn't it? When someone can't maintain a relationship, when they keep making the same mistakes over and over again, it makes you wonder what else they're failing at." The audience was dead silent now. Colleen Nolan's eyes went wide, and she touched Denise's arm. "Denise, come on, that's—" "What?" Denise snapped at Colleen. "I'm just asking questions that everyone's thinking. That's what we do on this show, isn't it? We speak our minds." She turned back to Sean. "So go on then, defend yourself. Tell us why we should believe you're any different now than you were with wife number 1, or 2, or 3. Sean's face had gone red. He sat forward, his voice low and controlled. "I don't need to defend myself to you or anyone else. My personal life is my personal life. The fact that you think you have the right to sit here and insult me on national television says far more about you than it does about me." "Oh, here we go." Denise rolled her eyes dramatically. The typical male response. Can't handle a strong woman asking tough questions, can you? What? Are you going to cry now? Storm off like a child? "Denise, that's enough," Kay Adams said firmly. "This has gone too far." "No, Kay, it hasn't gone far enough," Denise shot back. "I'm sick of these celebrities coming on here thinking they can just charm their way through and not answer real questions. Sean Bean wants us to watch his little show, but he can't handle 5 minutes of honest conversation." Sean stood up suddenly, his microphone pack making a loud thump against the sofa. "Honest conversation? Is that what you call this? You've done nothing but attack me from the moment you started talking. This isn't journalism. This isn't even entertainment. This is just you being cruel, because you can." The camera crew looked at each other nervously. The director in the control room was frantically speaking into headsets, unsure whether to cut to commercial or keep rolling. "Sit down," Denise commanded, her voice sharp as a knife. "You're under contract to be here for the full segment." "Contract?" Sean laughed bitterly. "A contract doesn't give you permission to abuse people. I signed up for an interview, not an interrogation." Denise stood up too, facing him across the coffee table. "Abuse? You think this is abuse? I'm asking you questions about your very public personal life. You're an actor, Sean. You live in the public eye. You don't get to pick and choose what people talk about." "Actually, I do," Sean said, his voice rising. "I absolutely do. Just because I'm an actor doesn't mean I've forfeited my right to basic human decency." "Oh, please," Denise scoffed. "You're so dramatic. This is why you've been divorced 4 times. Nobody can stand being around someone this sensitive." Janet Street Porter stood up abruptly. "Right, that's it. Denise, you need to stop. This is completely out of order." "Stay out of this, Janet," Denise said, without taking her eyes off Sean. "No, I won't stay out of it," Janet fired back. "You're humiliating our guest and embarrassing all of us. This isn't what this show is supposed to be about." Colleen Nolan nodded vigorously. "Janet's right. Sean, I'm so sorry. This shouldn't be happening." "Don't apologize for me," Denise snapped at Colleen. "I don't need you defending him. He's a grown man who can't handle a few hard questions." Sean shook his head in disbelief. "Hard questions? You called me a failure. You mocked my relationships. You implied I'm a bad person because my marriages didn't work out. Those aren't hard questions, Denise. That's just you being nasty because you think it makes good television." "It does make good television," Denise said, with a smug smile. "People love conflict. They love seeing celebrities squirm, and you're squirming beautifully right now." The audience had started murmuring, some of them calling out in support of Sean. A few people shouted, "Leave him alone!" and "This isn't right." "See?" Sean gestured to the audience. "Even they can see what you're doing. You're not some truth teller, Denise. You're a bully with a microphone." Denise's face twisted with anger. "How dare you? I have been in this industry for decades. I have interviewed hundreds of people. Don't you dare come onto my show and call me a bully." "Your show?" Kay Adams interjected. "Denise, this is all of our show." "Not right now, it isn't," Denise shot back. She pointed a finger at Sean. "You want to call me names? Fine. Let's talk about your reputation in the industry. Let's talk about how many directors have said you're difficult to work with. Let's talk about how you've been fired from productions." "That's a lie," Sean said, his voice dangerously quiet. "That's a complete lie, and you know it." "Is it?" Denise challenged. "Because I've heard stories." "What stories?" Sean demanded. "Go on then. Tell me these stories. Give me one example." Denise hesitated for just a second, and in that moment, everyone could see she had nothing. She was bluffing, throwing out accusations with no evidence, hoping to provoke a reaction. "I don't need to justify myself to you," Denise said, deflecting. "Exactly," Sean said, his voice heavy with disgust. "You don't have anything. You're just making things up now. This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable." A producer appeared from off camera, rushing onto the set. "Sean, Denise, let's just take a moment." "No," Sean said firmly. "I'm not taking a moment. I'm leaving. I should have left 10 minutes ago." He started to walk toward the exit. "Walk away then," Denise called after him. "Run away like you always do. That's what you're good at, isn't it? Running away when things get tough." Sean stopped in his tracks. He turned slowly, and the look on his face made even Denise take a step back. "You know nothing about me," he said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "You sit up here on your high horse, judging people, tearing them down for entertainment, and you think that makes you important. It doesn't. It makes you small. It makes you pathetic." "Get out!" Denise shrieked. "Get off my set, right now." "Gladly," Sean said. He began unhooking his microphone pack, pulling the wire out from under his shirt. But let me tell you something first. In 20 years, people will still remember me for the work I've done. They'll remember my characters, my performances, the stories I've helped tell. And you'll be remembered for this. For being the person who thought cruelty was the same thing as honesty. For being the person who couldn't tell the difference between asking tough questions and just being mean. He threw the microphone pack onto the sofa and looked at the other panelists. Janet, Colleen, Kay, you three are lovely. Thank you for trying to make this bearable, but I can't stay here and be insulted any longer. Sean, please, Colleen said, her voice pleading. Don't let her ruin this. She already has, Sean said sadly. He looked directly into the camera. To anyone watching at home who came here expecting to see a normal interview, I'm sorry you had to witness this. I hope you'll still watch the show I came here to promote because I'm really proud of it. And I hope you'll remember that just because someone is famous doesn't mean they deserve to be treated like this. Denise laughed mockingly. Oh, what a performance. The wounded actor playing the victim. You should get an award for this. Sean didn't respond to her. He simply turned and walked off the set, his footsteps echoing in the stunned silence of the studio. Good riddance, Denise called after him, but her voice sounded hollow now, unsure. Janet Street Porter rounded on her immediately. What is wrong with you? What on earth were you thinking? I was doing my job, Denise said defensively. Your job? Janet's voice was incredulous. Your job is to interview guests, not to attack them. That was absolutely disgraceful. Kay Adams had her head in her hands. This is a disaster, an absolute disaster. Oh, stop being so dramatic, Denise said, but she was looking around nervously now, seeing the expressions on the faces of the crew, the audience, her fellow panelists. Nobody was on her side. Colleen Nolan stood up. I can't sit here with you right now. I can't. She walked off the set too, leaving just Janet, Kay, and Denise. The producer rushed over to Denise, speaking in urgent, hushed tones. From the look on his face, he was furious. Denise's confident expression began to crack. We need to go to commercial, Kay Adams announced to the camera, her professional composure barely held together. We'll be right back. But as the cameras cut away, the damage was done. The studio audience was buzzing with shocked conversations. Some were standing up, preparing to leave. Others were on their phones, no doubt already posting about what they'd just witnessed. Janet Street Porter stayed on the sofa, staring at Denise with pure contempt. I hope you're proud of yourself. He was too sensitive, Denise tried to argue, but her voice lacked conviction now. No, Denise, you were too cruel. There's a difference between asking difficult questions and what you just did. You humiliated that man for no reason other than your own ego. Backstage, Sean Bean was being comforted by several crew members who were apologizing profusely. His publicist was on the phone, her face red with anger as she presumably spoke to the show's producers. Sean looked exhausted, drained by the confrontation. I've never been treated like that in my entire career, he told one of the makeup artists who was trying to help him calm down. Never. Not once. Back on the set, the producer was now arguing with Denise in full view of the studio audience, not caring anymore who saw or heard. His gestures were sharp and angry, and Denise's face was growing paler by the second. Kay Adams returned to the sofa after the commercial break, looking shaken. Janet was still there, but Denise was gone, having been ushered away by producers. We need to address what just happened, Kay said to the camera, her voice steady despite the chaos. Our guest, Sean Bean, left the show after what became a very heated exchange with Denise Welch. On behalf of Loose Women, I want to apologize to Sean and to all of you watching. That was not the kind of interview we aimed to conduct, and it should not have happened. Janet nodded firmly. Absolutely. Sean Bean is a talented, respected actor who came here in good faith, and he was treated appallingly. I want to make it clear that what Denise did does not represent the values of this show or the rest of this panel. The studio audience applauded loudly, clearly in agreement. In the green room, Sean was gathering his things, preparing to leave the building entirely. Staff members kept approaching him, offering apologies, refreshments, anything to make amends. But Sean politely declined everything. He just wanted to leave. "I won't be coming back," he told the producer who had followed him to the green room, "not while she's on the panel." "I completely understand," the producer said, looking genuinely distressed. "This never should have happened. I'm so sorry." Sean nodded curtly and headed for the exit. As he walked through the corridors of the studio, crew members stopped what they were doing to watch him pass. Some gave him supportive nods. Others looked embarrassed, as if they felt personally responsible for what had transpired. Outside, the bright daylight felt jarring after the artificial lights of the studio. Sean's car was waiting for him, and he climbed in quickly, eager to escape. As the vehicle pulled away from the studio, he looked back one last time at the building, shaking his head in disbelief. Inside the studio, the show continued, but the energy was completely different now. Kay and Janet tried their best to carry on with the remaining segments, but everything felt awkward and forced. The audience was distracted, still processing what they'd witnessed. Every few minutes, someone would whisper to their neighbor, rehashing moments from the confrontation. Denise never returned to the set that day. She remained in her dressing room, reportedly making phone calls and arguing with producers about what had happened. Through the thin walls, staff could hear raised voices, though no one could make out specific words. The other scheduled guests for that day's show were quietly told that their segments might be shortened or rescheduled. Some of them, having heard what happened to Sean Bean, considered backing out entirely. The publicist for one celebrity guest made it clear that their client would only appear if Denise Welch was not on the panel. In the control room, the director and producers were in crisis mode. Phones were ringing constantly as word spread through the industry about the incident. Social media was exploding with reactions, and not a single comment was defending Denise's behavior. Back on set, Janet Street Porter addressed the camera during a quiet moment. "I've been doing this job for a very long time," she said, her voice grave. "And I pride myself on asking tough questions, on not letting people off easy when they need to be challenged. But there's a way to do that with respect, with intelligence, with fairness. What happened today was none of those things. It was an ambush, plain and simple, and it was wrong." Kay Adams added, "We talk a lot on this show about kindness, about treating people well, about standing up against bullying. We need to practice what we preach, and today we failed to do that. I failed to stop it quickly enough, and for that, I'm truly sorry." The audience applauded again, this time even more enthusiastically. Several people stood up, giving Kay and Janet a standing ovation for their honesty and their willingness to call out what had happened. As the show finally wrapped up, the panelists left the set in silence. There was none of the usual chatting and laughing that typically followed a taping. Everyone just wanted to go home and forget this day had ever happened. Colleen Nolan, who had walked off earlier, was still in her dressing room when Kay knocked on the door. "Are you all right?" Kay asked gently. "No," Colleen said honestly. "I'm mortified. I'm embarrassed to be associated with what happened out there. That poor man. He didn't deserve any of that." "None of us could have predicted she'd go that far," Kay said, though her voice carried a hint of doubt. They all knew that Denise had a reputation for being confrontational, for pushing boundaries. But this had been something else entirely. The makeup artists and wardrobe staff gathered in small groups, discussing the incident in hushed tones. Many of them had worked with Sean Bean before, and knew him to be professional and kind. Several had also worked with Denise for years and weren't entirely surprised by what had happened, though they agreed it was the worst they'd seen from her. One crew member summed it up perfectly. "She finally went too far. She's been building up to something like this for ages, and today it all came crashing down. In her dressing room, Denise sat alone, staring at her phone. The messages and notifications were coming in so fast that her screen could barely keep up. And they weren't supportive messages. They were angry, disappointed, shocked. People she'd worked with for years were expressing their disbelief at her behavior. She tried to craft a response, typing and deleting several attempts at an explanation or an apology, but every version sounded hollow, defensive, insincere. Finally, she threw her phone onto the couch and put her head in her hands. The studio slowly emptied as the day drew to a close. The bright lights were switched off, leaving only the dim emergency lighting. The famous pink sofa, usually a symbol of friendly conversation and laughter, now seemed to represent something much darker. The producers held an emergency meeting that evening to discuss how to handle the fallout. The consensus was clear. This couldn't happen again. Changes needed to be made. Protocols needed to be established, and consequences needed to be faced. Meanwhile, Sean Bean was back at his home, trying to decompress from the ordeal. His phone had been ringing nonstop with calls from friends, colleagues, and journalists, all wanting to know what had happened and if he was all right. His agent had already released a brief statement expressing disappointment in how the interview had been conducted and confirming that Sean had left the set after being subjected to inappropriate questioning. The statement was professional and measured, but it didn't need to say much. The footage spoke for itself. Within hours, clips from the interview were circulating online, and the reaction was universally supportive of Sean and critical of Denise. Fellow actors began speaking out on social media, sharing their own experiences with hostile interviews and expressing solidarity with Sean. Directors and producers who had worked with him praised his professionalism and character, directly contradicting the baseless accusations Denise had made during the interview. One particularly powerful message came from a respected actress who wrote, "I've known Sean Bean for over 20 years. He is one of the kindest, most dedicated actors in this industry. What he endured today was disgraceful, and I hope everyone involved takes a long, hard look at how we treat people in the name of entertainment." The tweet was shared thousands of times within minutes. As night fell, the story was everywhere. News websites ran articles analyzing what had gone wrong. Media critics wrote think pieces about the line between tough journalism and bullying. Mental health advocates spoke about the damage that public humiliation can cause, even to people who seem strong and successful. Through it all, Sean remained quiet. He didn't give interviews, didn't post on social media, didn't try to capitalize on the sympathy he was receiving. He simply wanted to move on and focus on his work, the very thing he'd gone to Loose Women to discuss in the first place. But Denise's words kept echoing in his mind. The accusations, the mockery, the deliberate attempts to hurt him. He'd faced harsh reviews before, dealt with criticism of his performances, even weathered negative press about his personal life. But he'd never experienced anything quite like this. An attack disguised as an interview, cruelty masquerading as honesty. He thought about other guests who might have sat on that same sofa, facing similar treatment. How many had stayed quiet afterward, not wanting to seem difficult or overly sensitive? How many had laughed it off publicly while feeling hurt and humiliated privately? By speaking up, by walking out, by refusing to accept that kind of treatment, Sean had done something important. He'd drawn a line. He'd made it clear that fame doesn't equal permission to be abused, that being in the public eye doesn't mean forfeiting basic dignity and respect. The next morning, newspapers ran the story on their front pages. The headlines were damning for Denise and sympathetic to Sean. Television morning shows discussed the incident at length, with most presenters agreeing that Denise had crossed a serious line. But for Sean, the real victory wasn't in the public support or the vindication from his peers. It was in knowing that he'd stood up for himself in the moment, that he hadn't smiled through the abuse or pretended it was acceptable, that he'd trusted his instincts and walked away from a situation that had become toxic. The pink sofa would remain empty for guests in future tapings who might remember what happened there. A reminder that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply refuse to participate in your own humiliation, and that speaking truth to power doesn't always mean asking difficult questions. Sometimes it means recognizing when someone is being treated unfairly and having the courage to say so, even when the cameras are rolling and millions are watching. Because what happened on that set wasn't journalism or entertainment or even good television. It was a lesson in how not to treat people, delivered live and in full color for everyone to see. And the person who taught that lesson wasn't the host with the microphone and the platform. It was the guest who had the dignity to stand up, speak his truth, and walk away with his head held high.